Civilizing America, a user's guide from the ground up, Chapter 6, Set Social and Political Goals. From an array of needs, we agree on changes to work toward. An array of values are implied in the good of the whole, so we try to notice when they are missing and what action might sustain them. Though many problems seize our imagination, our root capacity is to notice value-laden circumstances happening in front of us without someone telling us, grasping a meaning we directly experience. We might think, oh, this is about inequality, or manipulation is in play here, or there's a threat to physical harm. To do this, we apply present-time situational awareness. Once recognizing salient details, we can draw on our knowledge and group effort for solutions. Familiar problems often imply the response needed. Justice for injustice. Inequity, fairness. Ignorance, knowledge. Needs, serve. Aimlessness, initiative. Fragmentation, unity. Falsehood, truth. Distortion, realism. Confusion, clarity. Hate, love. Evil, conscience. Self-interest, dedication. Inequality, balance. Manipulation, honesty. Carelessness, responsibility. Exploitation, resistance. Goal. First, govern. The goal that affects everything else is governance of society, gaining legislative management over the most urgent priorities. Once governing, we can select specific targets. Improve education, first governed. Rebalance economic inequality, first governed. Reform criminal justice, first governed. Save the environment, first governed. Reverse climate warming, first governed. Have a sensible immigration policy, first governed. First govern, and then on that solid ground argue the options before you. But your own election does not mean you govern. The elephant-sized variable is that your outcomes depend on your legislative body and executive. In state and national government, at least 3 branches must agree. As a congressman from Nevada, your issue could depend on a senator from Connecticut, so that attitudes there and everywhere concern you. Attitudes determine the limits of government activity. But even if attitudes shift, legislative problem solving can still seem agonizingly slow and inadequate, though this was intended by the framers of our government. Its structure is meant to resist passing influences. Dividing government into judiciary, executive, representatives, and senators stabilizes the process of change. But our founders evidently did not foresee how easily stability generates stalemate. Any branch of government can halt progress, even against a tidal change in public opinion. A further barrier is how representatives and senators each account to a small sector of voters, which is a structural bias against national unity. The principle, "we are all in this together," can appear irrelevant to a representative dependent on their district voting plurality. So that unity simultaneously across legislative boundaries and with separate electorates may come hard. The resulting structural tension protects the mistakes embedded in the system. Since a minority can block constructive change, we need to reach voters directly to address issues and counteract extreme views, educate all in how our system works, the damage it sustains, and ways to correct it. Even during political campaigns, those supporting no candidate can call out destructive attitudes and falsehoods. We need a public committed to values so that representatives are also. Goal: enhance democracy. In a healthy society, people are well informed and share power by selecting leaders who believe represent their values and interests. As this system is threatened, democracy weakens. Robert Reich noted 10 beneficial changes: automatic voter registration, eliminating voter suppression, public financing of elections, disclosure of the sources of all political contributions, closing the elected official to lobbyist revolving door, banning elected officials from owning individual stocks, access to candidates' IRS returns, eliminating gerrymandering, electing the president by popular vote, and reversing the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. The purpose of such changes is ensuring that the values of all the people influence their government. Backroom deals diminish when more have a say, which was Australia's motive for requiring people to vote. Here's a quotation. "To be great, America must clear the path to the polls, perhaps even mandating voting like Australia. There, turnout is more than 90%. Even in a bad year, 91% of Australians go to the polls. Australia does not suppress the vote, it demands the vote. In fact, Australians believe mandated suffrage moderates the country's politics because it's not just extreme partisans participating. Australia, however, makes voting easy, providing lots of well-staffed polling places and early voting options. It sends teams to collect ballots at prisons, hospitals, and nursing homes. And Australians make it a party, with community members hanging out afterward at stands selling democracy sausages and cakes to raise money for schools and charities. America loves a party. Why not institute Saturday celebrations at American polling places? While Australia is not a perfect nation yet either, they have found a way to encourage people to think we are all in this together, which helps spread blame evenly when things go wrong. Goal: appeal broadly. Candidates traditionally need a platform with broad appeal. An example was the election to Congress of Democrat Connor Lamb in March 2018 from Pennsylvania's heavily conservative 18th District. He campaigned for universal health care, against Trump's tax cut, for expanded background checks, for stronger unions, against cuts to Social Security, for a woman's right to choose, for medical marijuana. Lamb, a former Marine, was an attractive candidate, but a characteristic of his platform could help others. Candidates can overpromise and fail to deliver due to conditions beyond their control. But Lamb ran on what he does control. I will work toward this. Candidates need to describe their values and effort rather than promise results that depend on others. Separate purposes that reflect our values from objectives that reflect our current resources. Because people tend to vote for representatives who are like themselves, our platform is mainly a vehicle for engaging people, a way to show we align with their values and needs while they learn to like us. We need to meet with everyone we can on their own turf and utilize the full resources of the person-to-person effort pictured here. Goal: to improve long-term systems. Civilizations depend on rational resources that deliver what we need to live: food, water, security, health, income, transportation, and so on. They require careful attention because outcomes trending negative will only worsen. Upon gaining governance, we need to mind the store. Fix what goes wrong with the current tools for meeting ongoing needs. Some challenges affect life everywhere: pollution, climate change, economic inequality, racism, and global hostilities. Though current efforts on them are piecemeal, accumulative problems lacking a clear beginning, middle, and end do not lend themselves to hasty effort. So we do not expect results from a limited focus in too short a time. Power and force are ineffective for addressing countless challenges that affect people's lives. After the atom bomb on Hiroshima in World War II, governments funneled enormous resources into weapons and measured their influence by how many multiples they could destroy life on Earth. This appears to have generated a warped impression of the real world, distant from how billions of people live day to day, that comprises the real story. Entertainment and headlines subtly mislead us by riveting our attention on the current and sensational, framing the world like a movie script where a surge of energy solves everything and bad guys are shot and heroes hug before the final credits. We collapse 8 years of a revolutionary war into a 2-hour movie and address enduring needs with fitful efforts. To correct this false picture, we need patience, collaboration, and a longer time sense. Goal: balance power. Power is not an object like a weapon, but is someone's realization about what they can do. A century and a half ago, Lord Acton expressed its danger. Quote, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. End quote. Finding a tool in our hands, our instinct is to use it fully. But power can suggest to its possessor that they have risen past the limits of others' opinions and values. Because technology and civilization today place great resources at the disposal of personal whims, those wielding them need conscious self-restraint 1,000-fold more urgently now than in Acton's time. Many who obtain power or influence do so by excelling according to generally accepted standards. Altruistic or not, they retain their resources by employing them constructively. They may inform themselves about the world and think globally, recognize trends, have access to resources, take on significant challenges, and seek to ameliorate a world problem, sometimes profiting and at other times offering resources without return. International production, transportation, and information systems all depend on accumulating resources, and many responses to needs would not be able to happen without them. People at the other end of the economic spectrum who lack economic power, however, can be crushed by global corporations or struggle in a gutted domestic economy. Society asks the powerful to sustain the good of the whole and recognize when lesser motives threaten it. The fewer who control the production of wealth and the coercive forces of police and military, the less democratic the society, which can choose whether to increase the imbalance. Because you have power, we give you more power. Doing so, we expand the distance between the haves and have-nots. Ingrained in us is an expectation of fairness, which occurs when those with power use it to establish fair rules for all. When they apply it instead to gain unfair advantage for themselves, resentments accumulate and social systems break down. Unfair rules drive people away from any sport or enterprise, so that society's interest is how do we make the rules fair, and how do we get people to follow them? Power can be used for both good and ill, can strangle society's energy or sustain it. The military can protect us from threat or build empire. Big business can help or hinder. Goal: bring proportion to commercial interests. Of the 4 problems referred to in the title of my prior book, the primary one is the selfish influence of those who design society to benefit themselves and leave others behind, and is the driving force behind economic inequality and the disadvantages laid on the poor and middle classes. It undermined previous civilizations and threatens ours. One observer shares some facts along with some personal feelings about them. Quotation: "Big corporations claim to hate socialism if it means Medicare for all, but they sure as hell love socialism when it's welfare for them. 60 profitable corporations paid no federal taxes in 2018, twice the number that typically paid nothing in the years before the 27 tax breaks took effect. In fact, it's worse than that. 57 of those corporations demanded rebate from the government, which means taxpayers like you and me paid them to exist. These are corporations on the dole. Amazon, the online marketplace, made nearly $11 billion last year. And instead of paying the current low 21% corporate tax rate on that income, it demanded that taxpayers give it $129 million, which they did. It wasn't a rebate, since Amazon paid no taxes. It was a big, fat gift, withdrawn involuntarily from workers' pockets, wrapped in a fuzzy flocked Amazon smiley bag, and deposited directly into corporate coffers. This is perverse wealth transfer, from the poor and middle classes to the rich and corporations, and taxpayers didn't even get Amazon Prime in exchange. End quote. These actions by the elite reflect a larger pattern, that we arrange society in tribes of affiliation and instinctively favor ours over others. But narrow advantage can unbalance society. The comments of our seventh president, Andrew Jackson, on a proposal to expand the power of banks articulated a perennial challenge to democratic government. Quotation from President Jackson: "Every man is equally entitled to protection by law. But when the laws undertake to add artificial distinctions, to grant titles, gratuities, and exclusive privileges, to make the rich richer and the potent more powerful, the humble members of society, the farmers, mechanics, and laborers, who have neither the time nor the means to secure like favors to themselves, have a right to complain of the injustice of their government. There are no necessary evils in government. Its evils exist only in its abuses." End quote. Goal: change attitudes. While legislation can bring positive change, public attitudes may impede it. When citizens are unrealistic, untruthful, self-oriented, saturated with opinion in place of evidence, detached from constructive values and pragmatic solutions, and absorbed in unbalanced emotions, they and their representatives can endanger society. In his essay on liberty in the mid-1800s, John Stuart Mill, an astute observer of human nature, explained how this occurs as people's attitudes diverge from their form of government. Quotation: "People may be indolent, careless, or cowardly, and hence unwilling to expend the effort even to maintain the form of government. They may refuse to fight for it when it is threatened or attacked. They can be deceived, deluded, and cheated out of their government. They may become discouraged and panicked. They may surrender their liberties to a great man out of enthusiasm and trust him with powers that subvert their government. They may be unable to fulfill the duties it requires of them. They may not have sufficient forbearance to moderate their own violent passions, and pride to forego private vengeance or conflict, and leave resolution of disputes to the law." End quote. Mill believed that to manage society we must manage ourselves. If we do not, quote, "in such a case, a civilized government, to be really advantageous to them, will require to be in a considerable degree despotic, to be one over which they do not themselves exercise control, and which imposes a great amount of forcible restraint upon their actions. End quote. Dismissing responsibility, we may lose the privileges of a free society. Gains from legislation alone may be fragile because relying on continued public support. The antagonistic will define issues as us against them, populism, and approve violence, aggressiveness, retaliation, and authoritarian regimes. They distrust politics and are anti-establishment. Voters usually select candidates who match their own personality. While several of Mill's points describe current attitudes, one of them, surrendering power to a great man, concerns how we trust leaders in general. About many issues in our lives, we do not know the full import of decisions before us and rely on clues. A common signal of competence, for instance, is confidence in one's ability. Capable people often exude secure self-assurance, but a good actor can feign it so that we need to gather broader evidence and question our surface impressions. U.S. culture today, furthermore, encourages men's self-assertion, while the same in women would be labeled obnoxious. Hillary Clinton's 2016 attempt to express her knowledge of state and world affairs was at the sacrifice of appearing, quote, likable, unquote, and Donald Trump's boldness leveraged the difference. People were impressed when he said, with a straight face, "Only I can do this," while the same from Clinton would have been ridiculed. Hoping someone might drain the swamp, many thought maybe he will and voted for him. We can imagine the problem as a 9-person team required to represent a cross-section of society, so that 3 are resentful of leaders, ignorant of the team's purpose, antagonistic, and resist learning. Though a minority of the team, they can sabotage its plans, exacerbate its weaknesses, or shift the majority's direction. This makes it exceptionally important that the 6 help the 3 think differently. Even 1 or 2 changing their attitude helps the team. While Mill's observations might discourage our confidence in democracy, they make clear the response needed, that we work to change attitudes, that we cease presuming that society spontaneously corrects destructive beliefs and emotions. We know by now that it does not. Goal: confront lies. Conflict can puzzle those of us who are kind and trusting. Quote, "There must be a nicer way around this," unquote, we think, and are inclined to defer to others. A clue to the danger in that response is that trusting people are more likely than others to face bankruptcy. We may fail to account fully for unpleasant information. Gentle and courteous interacting with those seeking advantage, we may comply with their designs and let false assertions prevail. If we do not neutralize an obvious threat when we have the chance, It will strengthen until we cannot get rid of it. Windows of opportunity matter. The well-being of all requires us to correct mistaken ideas. Though caring and humble in our relationships, we can also be like iron about principle and truth. Be flexible, but don't go limp. When my father was in state politics, I often heard the phrase, "Call a spade a spade." While he was at times extraordinarily good to those he could help, he could be ferocious with a value at stake. I can hear him arriving home saying, "I gave him hell." When people leverage a falsehood for a selfish purpose, we do them no favor by cooperating. We correct mistakes as a kindness, bringing them into the real world of constructive morals. A common beginning for all types of damage is lying, a standard tool of rulers to control the public. Those willing to learn from history might study Hitler's use of the big lie. But it may surprise many that the U.S. Republican Party has long engaged in a deliberate strategy of lies to benefit its supporters and gain power. Ronald Reagan gave fresh force to prior efforts at this a half-century ago with his premier promise: lower taxes will increase revenue and balance the budget, which was demonstrably false. 3 reasons might explain why a promise goes wrong. First, we may have lied straight out. We knew better, and many on Reagan's staff did. Or we may have suspected we were wrong but did not care. We were negligent. Finally, we may have used bad judgment. But when we are proven wrong and repeat our claim anyway, it means we knew better and are just lying again. False claims then amount to lying and negligence. Since they injure society, we need to confront candidates about them in interviews, forums, and town hall meetings. It would go like this. Senator, I'm sure you're familiar with Ronald Reagan's promise that lower taxes would increase revenue to the government and help balance the budget, right? And you recall that instead it rapidly expanded the deficit. Isn't that correct? Reports from that time indicate that people on his staff knew better, but they promoted the idea anyway. Would you say that they lied to the public, or were negligent, or used bad judgment? If the low taxes on the wealthy that you support now just add to the deficit and impose a burden on children and grandchildren, is that what you do in your own life? Do you take on debt your own children must pay off so you can live better? Would you explain why you choose to benefit the wealthy now by loading debt on everyone later? We elicit understanding latent in the facts by drilling into their impact. We ask, did you know this was wrong but promoted it anyway? Or did you fail to understand its consequences? Lies circulated by Republicans in recent decades have had a profound effect on America and the world and deserve relentless questioning. Here's a list of them. Lower taxes will balance the budget. Benefiting the wealthy will trickle down to others. Unions undermine workers' well-being. The Iraq War will pay for itself. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein was allied with Al-Qaeda. John Kerry's war record was fake. Democrats are anti-flag, sick, permissive, corrupt, and destructive. Clintons are to blame for Whitewater. Clintons murdered Vince Foster. Al Gore claimed to have invented the internet. Barack Obama was born in Kenya. Barack Obama is a danger to the nation. Barack Obama is a Muslim. The Affordable Care Act will explode the deficit. Hillary Clinton was responsible for an attack on a State Department outpost. Hillary Clinton ran a pedophile ring from a pizza joint. The tax cut of 2018 will pay for itself. Voter suppression is only to prevent illegal voting. Gerrymandering is a legitimate political strategy. We become dishonest by valuing advantage more than we value truth. We might tell ourselves, I know this is false, but I'll say it anyway. Or, this could be true, so I'll say it till someone corrects me. Or, I would like this to be true, so I'll try it out and see if it catches hold. Society's interest instead is for us to adhere even to uncomfortable truth. I don't want this to be true, but it is, so I'll admit it. Or, let me tell you about a mistake I made. At this writing, documented lies by a Republican president exceed 10,000, which means a willingness to destroy democracy to gain power. People manipulated and deceived cannot judge well about their government, so that confronting lies is a critical function of democracy. While conservative thought through generations has contributed much to social prosperity, its current responsibility is to tell the truth. Speaking to a self-identified conservative, we can ask them to describe themselves. Here is my suggestion of a narrative. As I understand it, there are two kinds. One is old-fashioned and believes in saving money, paying your bills, being self-disciplined, and giving everyone a chance. The new kind believes in loading debt on their children and taking money from the poor so they can spend it themselves. If I've got this right, which kind are you? We listen to find out if they are motivated more by fear, greed, and prejudices than by hopes, dreams, and conscience. People may not realize how they have been manipulated. One explanation goes like this. Could I explain how three big issues come together? First of all, a wealthy elite has a disproportionate influence on the country. We know that, right? Second, they work against your real needs for education, a safe environment, health care, economic security, children's needs, infrastructure, and many other issues. They do not use the power they have to actually improve the nation as a whole. Third, in campaigning, they focus on hot buttons like fear of foreigners, gun control, racism, and abortion that play to your emotions. They hope that you will forget what matters in your life and just react in ways that benefit them. You might want to notice that and weigh your values carefully. Goal: find avenues of cooperation. Orienting around the good of the whole helps us balance self-limiting patterns. Imagine how others' world might feel and welcome their information past our biases. That others act against the good of the whole means we often must oppose them. If we are not careful, however, this can freeze us into an oppositional stance, where we over here are constantly right and they over there are wrong. A way to think of this is how spontaneously we presume ourselves to be the center of our world, with everything else set off at distances we assign. Mark Twain observed, quote, "There are an infinite number of axes to the world, one through every village and hamlet." Because this view is rooted in the structure of human perception, we need conscious effort to retain respect and consideration for others, even while we correct them when they make mistakes. If we use their flaws as an excuse to narrow our thinking, we can miss important information. Regarding everyone else to be as central to the world as ourselves reminds us steadily about fairness and shared power. Against opponents committed to evil, the Stalins, Hitlers, and criminal enterprises of all stripes, we know what to do. In the public square, however, we expect our opponents to seek what to them is good, but different from ours. The polluter is seeking a profit. Profit is okay. One funding the military instead of schools wants security. Security is okay. One discriminating against LGBTQ persons wants a world like themselves. Similarity is okay. Opposing immigration, one wants to preserve identity or their own social well-being. Identity and well-being are okay. Values inevitably compete, however, so that determining balance points is a constant challenge. How can you make a profit without polluting? Can you have a pure world without discriminating against people? Can you yourself have safety, identity, and well-being without injuring others? We try to find aims of theirs we can help with and distinguish carefully when they become destructive. When we and our opponents together subscribe to the good of the whole, we each talk and the other listens, and we accomplish mutual goals effortlessly just from the viewpoint we adopt. Enable everyone to participate. History has demonstrated three relationships between people and their government. The first was redistributing, a strong-arm government seizing one person's property to give to another, as has often occurred with monarchies, dictatorships, the Soviet Union during collectivization, and autocrat-led countries today. The second way was unfettered capitalism, robber barons, that created enormities of poverty versus wealth. The third way, participation, attempts to bring more people into the prosperous world of the second way by education and opportunity. Otherwise, some remain perpetually dependent and cannot help themselves to a better life, nor contribute to the goods and services society values. The health and education needed for employment and family are the flesh and bone of including them. Who gets the education? Strikes at the social core. Committing to enough for all children so they can participate as adults. We need to use public resources first and for as long as it takes to make sure everyone is up to the minimum bar for entry into society, so that with their own skill and motivation they can take up desired roles. For its own survival, society must provide people the tools to sustain themselves and contribute. If it does not, it blames them unreasonably when they turn against or depend on it. Goal: raise the quality of social engagement. We nurture the health of our group and society with principled behavior. Idealism: we form our goals from altruistic ideals instead of acting for self-interest. Purpose: with clear purpose about current needs, more cooperate. Responsibility: responsibility for the world guides our commitment even on limited tasks. Reliability: fulfilling our agreements, we enable others to do the same. Honesty: honesty gives people confidence in the actions of government. Personal development: we improve our thinking, develop our skills, and welcome others' help. Excellence: we aspire to excellence in everything to improve results and encourage others. Correction: we correct each other's errors, welcome feedback, accept discomfort, and learn. Practical effort: people exert effort as they believe in their purpose and wish to apply their values tangibly. Goal: expand group goals. A common problem is that we tend to confine our objectives within the limitations we impose on ourselves, usually aiming close to our present level. In a company with products so attractive that individual salespersons could become financially independent, a marketing supervisor observed that most could only imagine earning about 25% beyond their current income. The reason may be just protecting our self-esteem. We fear we will fail if we attempt too much. We each have a persistent pattern, and unless circumstances jar us, we seldom think beyond it. Maybe we expected to achieve a happy life just by marrying, finding a job, and raising a family. Confining our thinking to the few elements we could manage, we counted on others to take care of everything else. The lid we impose on our aspirations, however, filters out even important ideas before they reach awareness. Though we may absorb current events, we assume that what happens in the world is someone else's responsibility. We may try to vault this common hurdle by joining a group, but it needs two more features to make a difference. Members committing to specific values and acting on them. These three conditions together, membership, values, and actions, enlarge people's sense of the possible. They realize they can do together what they could not do alone. To neutralize the draw of people's prior affiliations, we welcome them into our own group and engage them in activity. Goal: assert a constructive vision. Ordinary activity can have a cumulative effect. Listen to others. Converse. Define and use terms accurately. Quote sources. Introduce evidence. Picture what you want in society. Connect the picture to your personal experience. Deliver the picture to everyone you can. Tell the part that appeals to the person facing you. Call on mutual experience. Emphasize facts and return to them. Project cause and effect into the future. Be able to explain ideas clearly and instantly. Nail misrepresentations and lies. Refute specious arguments. Goal: save the environment. Among all living beings, only we can substantially affect our environment to enhance our survival. That around 99% of all species that have ever existed are extinct hints that we can exhaust it. To be the exception that survives, we need to think beyond our impulses. The principle about all life forms is that we drive to extinction anything we harvest faster than it can reproduce. We can apply this to all the resources we use and project their trends. We may not even notice the changes for a long time, but eventually think, there are fewer deer now than before. I wonder why. We not only kill off living things at an unprecedented rate, but also ruin the environment they need to survive. This undoubtedly surprises many, because our technological ingenuity has appeared so successful. Who would have thought that better cars and refrigerators could injure us? But pollution is society's deliberate choice to ruin its environment instead of cleaning up after itself. And now, because of it, the planet warms in destructive ways. A few decades ago, it seemed inconceivable that melting ice could raise the sea level unacceptably, even in the lives of our children and grandchildren. A few scientists could picture it and tried to explain, though politicians were unimpressed. pollution has increased steadily since the start of the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago. The Global Health Data Exchange informs us that it is the prime cause of premature death around the world. And in 2015, in soil, air, and water, it killed 15 times more people than in all wars and other violence. 9 million premature and 16% of all deaths. The causal sequence is humans have needs and wants. Their needs and wants drive productivity. Productivity not contained within constructive values generates oppression, crime, and pollution that harm humans and other living things. Goal: take better care of all children. Worldwide research has found that air pollution especially affects children, increasing mortality, pregnancy issues, birth defects, respiratory problems, school absenteeism, immunities, rickets, asthma, and lung diseases. Poor children are affected more because living closer to pollution-generating factories. Cheered by children's exuberance and optimism, we try to imagine them older. Their education, job opportunity, environment, health, and freedom. Will they marry? And their marriage persist? Will they have children? And how will their children live? The United States is, quote, quotation now, a country that professes to care about children at their youngest and most fragile. But here, for every 100,000 live births, 28 women die in childbirth or shortly thereafter, compared with 11 in Canada. This ratio has more than doubled since 1990. Black women are 3 times as likely to die giving birth or shortly after birth as white women. End quote. The U.S., meanwhile, quotation again, has a higher child poverty rate than nearly all other OECD countries. That's economically developed countries. 2, 3, or even 4 times as high as in nations comparable in terms of per capita income. As many as 1.5 million families caring for 3 million kids live on less than $2 per person per day in cash income. While we affect these problems, end quotation, while we affect these problems by addressing economic inequality, local effort can help with many child-oriented issues, like daycare, adoptions, foster care, coping with disabilities, tutoring, youth organizations, and sports leagues, services for single-parent families, physical and character development, counteracting abuse, effective parenting, gang influence, teen sexuality, teen preparation for life, preventive health education, sexually transmitted diseases, smoking, alcohol abuse, and drug chemical dependency. Goal: remedy economic inequality. My wife and I often see a homeless man at the corner where our street crosses the arterial. he holds up a sign, homeless, and sits on a box with his head down. My wife has chatted with him during her walks and tells me he has a family, but cannot see them nor go to a shelter because he, quote, has anger problems and drug issues. Not a member of the establishment, he is stuck at the bottom of the inequality spectrum. We have answers for drug abuse, anger, and a place to sleep if we wished to use them. For society's survival, its interest is treating people so they can participate, so their skills can be developed, employed, and rewarded. Either we want to include everyone, or for losers to shuffle off to suburban street corners and hold up signs. Finland sharply reduced homelessness by giving people a place to live and working from there to bring them back into society. All it takes, they say, is to have a social conscience. A similar effort in the U.S., however, faces the larger question of why they are homeless in the first place and how to lead them out of poverty. Again, we ask how it is that we allow a wealthy nation to extract money from the poorest and place it with the richest. Unless we alter that system, homelessness will increase. Health and longevity are tangible outcomes of our attitude toward people. Getting sick without resources, they die younger, or even recovering, lose their job and are diverted to lower paying ones. Their food is cheaper and less nutritious, compromising their health and ability to work. Continually sicker, they cannot use educational opportunities, nor move elsewhere for better work, but must depend on social services to survive. Similarly with a downsized worker who never completed high school. We can consign him to the couch at his uncle's place until an antisocial group embraces him and leverages his frustration, or enable him to participate by supplying an education, paying him to learn a trade, and putting him to work. His teachers also remain on the bottom side of the median. We can pay them enough that they do not need 2 jobs to support their family by taking a little more from the top 10%. Most workers are now on their own. The Taft-Hartley Act weakened organized labor, and right-to-work laws deceived workers into believing they did not need union protection because employers would take care of them. Restoring unions' traditional strength would help greatly. Businesses typically pay only what they must to obtain the help they want. Bonuses go to top dogs rather than bottom. And employee pensions can be a nuisance. Many issues affect the health of our economic sector and its impact on workers. Economic inequality, learning employable skills and attitudes, minimum wage, employment opportunity, regulating business activity, fair and equal compensation, inner city economic breakdown, loss of work ethic, worker safety, fair market conditions, family farm survival, teen employment, assimilating immigrants with language and cultural differences, monopoly, consumer protection, employee security, taxes, truth in advertising, product safety, international capital movement, fraud and illegal trading, corporate subsidy, special interests, and financial influence in government. After World War II, from concern about military personnel returning to civilian life, Congress decided to pay them to go to college, to learn something besides making war. The GI Bill. Universally applauded for accomplishing its purpose then, its premise is valid now. People lacking skills for respectable employment can be supported through a college program, a GI Bill for the poor and unemployed. To pay for all this, we need only follow the lead of a respected conservative Republican. Under Eisenhower, business prospered. We built the interstate highway system. No one claimed to suffer, and the top tax rate on the wealthy was 91%. Goal: teach everyone to read. 32 million adults are illiterate, according to the U.S. Department of Education and the National Institute of Literacy. The Organization for Economic Development, Cooperation and Development found that half of U.S. adults cannot read a book at the 8th grade level. With a deficient education, they cannot understand conditions affecting their lives and are easily manipulated, resented, or become dependent. Our national value should be to provide everyone sufficient education so they know how our history brought us here, how to develop their own happy life, and how to contribute to an effective and honest society. A study by the College Board identified the values key to a civilized society. The two codes students need to learn for success in college and in life, it found, turn out to be computer literacy and understanding the U.S. Constitution. The former implies the ability to read, understand, and communicate in today's world, and the latter means adopting the values that guide our culture. Goal: assess a range of needs for priorities. We might agree that poor education, inadequate health care, a polluted environment, and a manipulative government do not reflect civilized standards. To meet such challenges, we need to organize details rationally, be responsible for our outcomes, and treat everyone ethically. Rationality, responsibility, and empathy. Toynbee found that rulers destroyed 26 past civilizations by ceasing to be creative for the good of the whole and becoming simply dominant, riding on the labors of others. They were not rational, responsible, nor empathic. In discussing governmental action, we inevitably weigh the advantages of smaller versus larger government, less intervention versus more. To resolve it, we identify the value a need represents, and then reach group consensus on two questions about it. Does this value matter to us? And is governmental action appropriate to address it? Because social systems may or may not be able to achieve a particular result, we can expect diverse answers to these questions. Local agencies address many issues, and we can encourage them to step up to their responsibilities. Regional media that have long provided oversight of agency activities, however, are weakening as national networks like Facebook and Google soak up resources, so that local governments more easily evade public scrutiny. We can identify policies addressing a need and ask someone to be our eyes and ears. An activist can attend an agency meeting and say, "I'm here representing, we have some questions about." The group can respond when needs warrant action. Concerns state and national governments are invited to address are illiteracy in adults and school children, housing, religion-based violence, white-collar crime, drug crime, gun control, street violence, recidivism rehabilitation, preventive health care, medical ethics and practices, deteriorating bridges and infrastructure, mass transit, and community land use planning. Elder abuse, domestic abuse, physical and developmental disabilities, food and shelter for the homeless and hungry, and medical options for the underserved. Large-scale issues fall to national government. Social Security, national debt, campaign finance reform, military preparedness, social justice, human rights, immigration, terrorism, racial discrimination, special interest influence, law enforcement practices in police, court, corrections, and prison systems. Medicare and Medicaid can be managed by the federal government or by states and interstate compacts. While volunteers and associations may monitor many needs, major environmental impacts typically require government intervention. Renewable resource overharvesting, disappearing fish stocks, non-renewable resource depletion, alternative energy development, air and soil pollution, water allocation, clean drinking water, endangered species protection, animal rights, wilderness destruction, misuse of eminent domain, soil quality depletion, agricultural runoff, ocean ecology and pollution, ozone depletion, global warming, garbage and hazardous waste disposal, coral reef disintegration, and loss of rainforest. These needs deserve careful attention from a national movement with many worldwide concerns.